Jamie here. Hope everyone's doing outstanding. October 21st, 2024, 8:55 on this Friday, Monday. Talk really quick about the market, some names I'm looking at, go from there. Take a look at futures. Down a hair this morning. S&P down about 0.2%. Was down a little more earlier, has bounced back a little bit. But we're coming into this week. Markets, S&P and Dow at all-time highs. Uh, we have earnings season picking up, so 400 plus companies report this week, including names like Tesla, IBM, and about I think it's 20% or so of the S&P, and then things really start to pick up next week. So first take a look at the S&P and the SPY 585 or so looks like resistance came up and hit that a couple times last week, couldn't hold. And then on the flip side, when we did have some weakness, 578 or so, is where we found some support. So those would be the two areas I'm watching this week. There's not much else in the way of catalysts outside the earnings. Of course, the weekly jobless claims Thursday is kind of garnered some attention as, jobs report will be the last big data piece the following week. Well, the week after, ahead of the Fed meeting, which I think is November 6th, right? November 5th and 6th, something like that. All right, so that's the S&P. That's the markets. Overnight last night, China. So they announced the a 0.25% cut to the benchmark lending rate for banks. I don't know if that was less than it won't be less expected, but it was somewhat in line. But I guess a little disappointing. Markets couldn't find a rally on that news. Asian markets sold off. I don't know if it was all because of that. And then this morning, you look at Europe markets are taking it on the chin as well. Maybe just some consolidation with the recent rally in the markets. Some things, I keep looking at the small caps. IWM, we came down to 525 on Thursday and bounced, came down to 525 on Friday, came close to it, didn't get down as low as Thursday's handle, but held that there as well. So definitely a key spot. We were gapping under that 225. Am I saying 525? 225 handle this morning in the pre-market and have held that. So really, I keep saying it. We only have a couple months left in the year. We'd really love to see the small caps start to lead the charge into the end of the year. So that's overall markets. So individual names, and Netflix reported that monster quarter last week and added those Roku calls, and Roku doing what it typically does. It teases, gapped higher, didn't even gap too much. And it's one of the reasons why I added the calls at the open, because I figured it was going to be over 80 bucks. And then sure enough, it does spike up into the high 70, 79 handle and then just sold off. And then it sold off all the way till the noon hour and then just went on a meticulous melt up into the close. Was testing over 80 and closed pretty much flat at 80 bucks. I think that the backdrop of Netflix just sets the tone. And you saw Spotify rallying on Friday. It just sets the tone for this whole content consumption sector, I guess you would call it as a whole. So I take a look at, of course I look at Roku with a bullish bias, right? My my goggles are bullish for, or my glasses, bull glasses, whatever you want to call them. So when I look at the chart and some of the setups, I always look at Roku through that lens. And it's sitting here at 80 bucks here. If it can break over 80 in the morning and reverse into the green, and it won't take much. I mean, it's 79, 89 here in the pre-market. I might look for some strikes into next week. They report earnings October 30th. So premiums are elevated into next week, but maybe add some more strikes into next week and be able to lock some in for some premium build, either close them all or ride the rest into earnings. But really like the setup here, especially over that 80 handle. I put it on the watch list. You can see the chart, that resistance. 79.65 was back in September. Right, similar area. If we can break over that, I think we're good to go. I also added some more Redfin strikes. I still have the January. So the Januaries I got in September, when it had the big rally up into the 15s, I was able to lock some of those in to cover costs for 100%. And then I've just been holding those. And it kind of went down a little bit. The premiums have held up. They're still slightly in the red, but I'll just continue to hold those Januaries. And then I went and added Novembers. The stock's been trading around that 50-day moving average. At some point, it's going to just get a little kick and resume the uptrend. And when that happens, the 15 handle falls and it's going to be 17.68 and then 20 bucks plus. I think that happens before the end of the year. So continue to love the Redfin. And then Tesla. So I did the earnings implied moves this week, and typically I look for names when I start looking at the list of names. I look at some of my familiar names. I look at and say, wow, is this being overpriced to premium or is it underpriced? So if it's overpriced, obviously, if the implied move is higher than expected, or at least my expectations, you would think there's going to be a premium crush on the calls or puts. But on the flip side, if you see, and this is typically what I look for in some of these names, when you see a name that might have an underappreciated move, so the implied volatility, the implied move may be substantially less than what you think there might be a big move then there's an opportunity, right? So it's always about trying to find an edge in the market to and an opportunity to help to help further gains. So Tesla, and you take a look, it's been chopping around for the last 6 sessions, last week and the week before. It's not a name I've traded recently. I'm a big Tesla bull, but that was back in the day. I haven't traded it recently because I don't know how much the risk reward, the premiums, all that kind of bake into the decision there. But you start looking, and I did the historicals and I pulled them up. And some of the reason I don't do this is time, right? You only have finite amount of time, 24 hours a day, and to find time to do different things, it there has to be a reward for it, right? There has to be a return on that investment of time. So we'll see how this plays out. I'm not saying that Tesla's going to do this, but if you look, they've over the last 4 quarters, the stock has moved an average of over 3% more than the implied move, which means, I mean, it's downward too. So you would, you would technically speaking have to get both sides of the trade, right? You have to get the straddle up, or instead of spending 100% on the call side, you get 150% and 50% on either side. I don't even know how much that would pay out, but if you take a look, it's moved 3% over its implied move. So that means that the calls and puts have definitely been in the green. It's just a matter of by how much. So we're coming into this quarter is an implied move of 8%. You start looking at the chart and 240. I mean, that looks like a doable because you have the gap uh, fill from a couple weeks ago, and then you start looking at that 240, 250 or so from back in August. I'm probably not going to trade it. Reports Wednesday after the close. It's going to have a big weighting on the S&P, so we'll see how that plays out. But certainly interesting, and I'm also curious to see how this plays out, how it closes, if it's going to be another one of those moves that exceed the implied move, or it's going to be an outlier where it doesn't move as much as expectations. All right, a couple other quick names. SE, not really going to talk about this one here. Consolidating all the way over $100 again. Looked like it was going to break out and then just melted under 99, closed at 98.90. Still love this one for upside. It's a little bit lower here in the pre-market. Some of it has to do with the Asia market selling off, so always seems to sell off in sympathy in the morning. Hopefully that can reverse. Clear Secure, I was mentioning on the rant yesterday, it almost looked like the shorts came in right at the open. It was 37 and just boom, no bids to be found, and they just pushed it down under 36. It is under 36 here in the pre-market. I'm just going to remain patient. I'm not going to do anything with my January strikes. I may look for some other strikes to play for some upside if it can find some footing, but I'll continue to be patient there. I added some wind strikes. Las Vegas Sands reports earnings Wednesday after the close, so that could certainly be a tailwind. I mean, it could be a negative too, but I think it'll be a tailwind for Win. Win at some point, probably this week, is going to report their earnings date. If it's, why don't I have this up here? Sorry, folks. Um, so I got the November strike. Still plenty of time. I think there's trades north of 115 in the coming weeks, and some of that you're going to need the Asian markets to start to rally again. But I even without that, I think Las Vegas Sands is going to report a great quarter, and that'll bode well for Win. So that's Win. And then last but not least, here is Obesity Week is coming up November 3rd to November 6th. I think it's Saturday to a Wednesday. So in 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever that is. Going to be big news. And so VKTX has oral data they're going to report on November 3rd. So I think that's going to come out in conjunction with Obesity Week. VKTX also has earnings on Wednesday. And this is one of the first weeks. And gosh, I can't remember the last time I don't have a position in VKTX because at some point, I think it's going to get acquired. It's going to be, and the news is going to happen on a Monday morning. So that's kind of the thought process there and having calls on VKTX. But I think at the earnings, I don't know, and I said this last report, and they came out with a surprise saying the FDA allowed them to go straight from phase 2B study to phase 3 study. And that both, when the FDA does that, it takes the timeline for a drug, it moves it up, right? Instead of it being a 6 or 12 month extra timeline, it removes that 6 extra 12 month. So I thought that Bodo, and then the stock rallied. I think it was up to 80, and then just gave it all back. This has been chopping here, so maybe it's the next catalyst. Bollinger Bands are tight there, so premiums are crazy for into Obesity Week, past into the week of Obesity Week and past that. So I may look, depending on what how the premiums look at the open today or tomorrow. I might look for some strikes on VKTX, and then of course in tandem with that, you have Turn, ALT, and GPCR, and those are some names that might rally into Obesity Week. So don't be surprised if I had some strikes there. And that's it, folks. 25 minutes to the open. Let's have a great day. I'll be back on audio later. rock and roll.